Yusko.
Have you ever been curious about how they put music together in a studio? How tracks are laid down? What does it take to put a studio together? Well, if I got an episode for you, Dan Ferguson from Riff Haven Audio put a studio together about audio recording and how to work with an artist. It really is magical. Check it out. I was to meet Dan Ferguson, who's going to talk about his studio and give us some insights into behind the scenes on how he influences and creates art and works with the artist. So, Dan Ferguson, welcome to the Long Island Sound podcast. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Name
Name of the studio, in Audio. We're in Levittown, New York, on Long Island, and just finished building it. And as of September, we're open. We're rolling.
All right, so brand new, excellent. It's really must be a lot of fun putting a studio together. It's costly, I'm sure, but
it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work, but it didn't feel like work. I'm sure that people that helped build it, my wife and our dads are actually the four people that put this thing together. It was very much a DIY project, but it came out super professional. I think we lucked out in all the spots that we needed to luck out, but there was a lot of research being done as to what needs to be done to make this thing soundproof, so that we could work through all hours of the night, and also make it acoustically superb, so that once we're in here, everything's sounding the way it needs to. So there was a lot of work put into this thing, but it was a lot of fun doing it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's so amazing to me, and it happened to me with the podcast as well. When I was first putting my studio together, I was like struggling. I was on a shoestring budget, and it took another engineer, a guy named Kevin Kelly, who said, "Hey, it's not your microphone, it's your room.
Yeah,
you got to soundproof that room." And I did it the cheap way by going to Harbor Freight and getting storage blankets and doing it that way. And then a good friend of mine said, "Hey, I've got some sound deafening panels that I'm not using." And I'm like, great. And it really made a difference.
Sure.
To block out the trucks on the street and what have you. So, yeah, there's a whole science to that. From what I understand.
There is. It's actually two. I mean, some people may know this, some people may not, but they're separate from each other. So, for this room, we actually built a room within a room. So, we framed out two separate walls with about an inch apart from each other. Mm-hmm. And then the thing that really stops sound is mass. So we have 2 layers of 5/8 inch drywall, which was not a lot of fun humping it out of here. There's a lot of sheetrock in here.
Right.
So it's double sheetrocked on top of a set of frames, and then you leave about an inch of an air gap in between, and then put another set of frames, and then sheetrock the other side, or if it's an exterior wall, plywood. And this way, when the sound is just vibration, right? So once it hits the sheetrock, if you're in a wall in your house, it's going to hit the sheetrock, transfer into the framing, and then just transfer right over to the sheetrock on the other side. But now that you have the air gap, there's no place for it to go. And as long as you seal up literally every single little tiny hole with acoustic caulk, there's no place for sound to escape or sound to enter. And it's kind of wild. You do the science and you do the work, but you don't really know if you've achieved it until it's done. And I remember one day we had just finished the last day of sheetrock, so I was taking all the scraps out, and I had music playing in here, and I was loading it in a separate room. And as I went into the other room, it just occurred to me that I couldn't hear the music. I was like, "Oh my God, I think we did it!" So that was a cool moment. But yeah, it sounds great in here, and we had, I think, a plane fly overhead and thunderstorms. You can't hear anything in here. It's once you're in here, you're in here making music, and you get to be creative without any distraction.
That's amazing. I was in a friend's studio, and he was getting some sort of vibration, and he realized it was they had plexiglass window for the studio engineer to separate from the artist, and they had to figure out something with that, because that was creating some sort of reverb. But hey, let's do this. Let's turn back the pages. You're a musician as well. Tell me how you got started with an instrument. How old were you, and what really grabbed you to play music?
I remember the moment actually.
Oh, okay.
I was probably 8 or 9. My parents always had music in the house, and when you're a kid, you're at the mercy of what your parents listened to, which was cool. They played good music, but I was the oldest, and I think I was the most sheltered out of my 4 brothers.
Okay.
I remember we weren't allowed to watch MTV, and so one summer, no one was home, so I snuck it, and that was the summer that Metallica's Black Album came out. And the video that was playing was Wherever I May Roam. And it was that particular video was just clips of them playing live. And I remember seeing that and being like, what is that? That's awesome. Like, I got to figure out how to do that. And when you're a kid, you don't really realize how music, that it's recorded someplace for people to hear. And then there's these musicians that are actually doing it. And then they go and they play shows, and so all this information just started hitting me, and I was like, I want to learn more about this. So begged my mom to buy me the Black Album, and she did. And that Christmas, I got a Walkman. That was the year that the Walkman was really big. I'm dating myself here.
So wait, I got to explain Walkman to something.
Yeah.
Walkman was the first time you could take your music with you.
Yep.
And Sony came out with it. It was a cassette player, basically. Yep. And I think they were yellow.
Yeah.
And it was, prior to that, it was, a boom box with a cassette player that you would carry around this huge piece of luggage to get your music. And anyway, just to give a reference point.
Yeah. I mean, we might have to explain what cassettes are to some of your audience. No, but I got a Walkman, and I remember I would just sit and play side A, and then side A would run out. I'd flip it and listen to side B. And when side B ran out, I'd flip it. And I honestly think that's what drew me to eventually to production, because I mean, everybody that knows that album, it's one of the most sonically phenomenal pieces of work that to this day stands the test of time. It was recorded in '91, and it still sounds phenomenal even to today's standards. And I remember I was always in tune to these little things that I was hearing, and I was probably 9 or 10 at the time, and like all these little intricate details of percussion that they had in the drums that were hidden, and guitar tones, and reverbs and delays on the leads, and all these things just kind of captivated me. And so fast forward a few years, I turned 13, I asked for a guitar, and I learned how to play. This is before the days of YouTube and stuff like that. So
okay,
I was a huge Metallica fan, so I bought this book that was called Riff by Riff, and they had the tabs, and literally they had all 5 of their first albums, and I just sat in my room and taught myself how to play the first 5 Metallica albums. And as a guitar player, there's not a lot of better instructors out there than James Hetfield, written out in tablature form. So that's how I got my skills up to par. And then once I could actually play a little bit, started writing and formed a band, and we had a band for a little while, and then eventually got to college, and my roommate brought up an acoustic guitar one time, and I grabbed it and started playing, and a buddy of mine that lived down the hall was like, "You could play guitar?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "I could play guitar." And then next thing you know, he and I are writing songs. And so back in 2002 is when we really started going. We were up in Connecticut, and we played shows all over New England. Gaveldown's the name of my band, and we played Massachusetts and New Hampshire and the city. We got one show into CBGB's before it closed, which was cool.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. So the thing that got me into recording was we had 3 songs, found somebody that knew how to do it, and he recorded it, and it sounded good. It sounded professional, but it didn't have didn't sound like I wanted it to sound.
Okay.
Not that it sounded bad or anything, but it just didn't have, the flavor that I was kind of looking for. And obviously college students, we didn't have a lot of money. So, next time it was time to record, I was like, "Guys, you cool with me doing this?" And they're like, "You know how to do it?" I'm like, "I'll figure it out." So
right.
I ended up renting one of those studio in the box. These were short-lived things. It was right on the cusp of the digital, boom with computers and stuff, but
okay,
wasn't a computer. It was basically a computer attached to faders. So they had like the plugins inside the unit, and some people know what I'm talking about. But I did my first recording on that, and it was awful. But it got me to wrap my head around what things were doing and how things needed to be done, and started buying books and stuff, and eventually got my first DAW when I bought a Mac, and I bought Logic.
Okay.
And after that, it was just recording my band, recording friends, and fast forward, I don't know how many songs I've done, but kind of got my head wrapped around it now.
Yeah, what's amazing about your story, and I think it's true of really good musicians. The fact that you told me about that exercise of flipping the cassette over and over and listening and getting the nuances. And for people who are not musicians, there is woodshedding the instrument, but there's also the development of the ear.
Sure.
And, some people can have these nuances. I know when I talked to my friend Mike Nugent, he's a producer as well. Every time I went into his studio, not that he was recording me by any means, oh, listen to this. This is how we tweak this and that. And yet what he did also is he handed it off to somebody else to do the final mix. And
right.
I think there's something about having other ears and influences to make your song more than you may have imagined. So
Sure.
I find that very interesting on how you approach this. Hey, let's do this. Let's just take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk about how you interact with artists and take their vision of what they expect and how you marry what you're hearing. It's not always what I'm playing, it's what the audience is hearing.
Sure.
Is the old caveat. So, hey everybody, stick with us. We'll be right back, and this come.
The Long Island Sound Podcast offers you not one, but 2 ways to engage with our captivating content. Tune in to our audio podcast on your favorite platform and let your imagination paint vivid pictures of Long Island stories. Or if you're craving a visual feast, catch our video podcast on Spotify and on the Long Island Sound YouTube channel. Double the options, double the excitement.
Hey everybody, we are back with Dan Ferguson of Riff Haven Audio, and we're getting a peek behind the curtain on how the magic happens. How, what's the secret sauce of making an album and a final track. So I got to ask you this. When somebody comes to you and says, hey, Dan, we want to record in your studio, and how do you figure out the dynamic between artist and producer as far as how you work with them? What's your style, I guess I'm asking?
First and foremost, I like to get talking to the artist about the music as early as possible. So,
okay.
I've had times where there'll be a band that wrote a song and they're jamming on it in the studio, and it's a song, and I'll go into their rehearsal room and just listen, and maybe make notes. Mm-hmm. It's great if I could get a recording of it, even if I just stick my iPhone in the middle of the room, and just think about what I'm hearing, and the parts that are really cool. Maybe I have an idea like, oh, this chorus might be cool to double the second time it happens, or whatever, and then just bring them in and talk about it. And my thing is, I have a way that I like to work, but that's just the way that works really well for me. That that's proven successful in the past. But if there's an artist that will perform better if they work a different way, then we'll work that way. To me, it's my goal and what I do is I just want to take the artist's vision for whatever they are trying to get out of their music and make it the best that it possibly can be. And sometimes that's rewriting a vocal. Sometimes that's, adding a harmony where there wasn't one. Sometimes, it could be, shortening a chorus or whatever it is. But, my thing is I just want to get the best product possible. And, when you're in a collaborative process, which that's exactly what this is, you try to get the best ideas possible. And, to me, it doesn't matter who it comes from. Like if there's a drummer that has an idea about a guitar solo and it's cool, like let's try it. And
right.
It might be awesome. And who cares that the drummer came up with it? To me, it's not an ego thing. I think if you're a musician that's playing with other musicians, that's your music. It's all your music. So,
Sure.
We want the best product possible when all is said and done. And,
And I'm sorry. You also bring up a good point about taking in information from whomever. It doesn't matter that a drummer's talking about a guitar riff or vice versa, I would think. Once you create that atmosphere to be creative, that's where I think the magic happens as well.
absolutely. It's, and if someone's working with me, that, I'm very upfront with them. I'm in the end, it's their art, and I'll always respect that it's their music.
Right.
But at the same time, any musician, I'm sure, that's listening to this, they've probably made at least one recording in the past that every time they listen to it, they're like, man, I wish we would have done this in this part.
They cringe.
I wish we could have changed this section. Or, even you see bands playing live, and, they'll do a thing live that they didn't do on the record. And, you got to think a lot of times that's an idea that came after the fact. And,
Right.
Part of working with a producer is those ideas get to be thrown out before you make that song, so you're exploring all these different avenues. You might come up with something awesome that, you wouldn't have gotten that inspiration on your own.
Right. I agree with you. What's interesting in how things have changed with digital recording, it's like everything's in your iPhone right now. And a lot of artists, are one-man bands, so to speak, no pun intended, in
Sure.
that they're the ears and the eyes of the music, and they mix it and they put it together and it's out. And just my gut feeling, this is just a gut feeling. It's like you're not giving your art the ability to have other influences and stretch the imagination, or even push you in a direction that you may not have done before.
Sure.
I think, and this is speculation, I think you could too easily get into, and I've heard different artists and local artists on Long Island, I won't name them, where it's like, hey, their song's good. It sounds exactly like the 3 songs that came prior to it.
Right.
And inside I just, I wish they would push themselves in whatever different direction and take a chance. And maybe that's is that what a producer's there for as well, in your opinion?
I think that, there's this old quote that I really love. It's John Wooden said it, I think he was one of the greatest basketball coaches ever. He said, whatever you do in life, surround yourself with smart people that will argue with you. And
Right.
I think that's, when I say argue, I just mean, have some kind of conversation about anything. There are lots of artists that are totally capable of self-producing, and their stuff comes out awesome. But
Right.
there's also lots of cases like you're describing where, no one's there to tell them, hey, this does sound like the thing that we did on the other song, or, you always need that challenge. And, some of the greatest artists that you see have people that are constantly challenging each other. If anybody saw that, the Queen documentary movie, the end of no spoilers, sorry if anybody didn't see it, but it's been out for a while now. Freddie Mercury at one point, he goes off on his own to record by himself, to do his own thing, and he hired the best musicians to play, exactly what he told them to play, and the music, he hated it,
Wow.
and he came back to Queen and begged them to take him back because he missed he missed being pushed by his bandmates, and I think that's a big part of it. And sometimes, producer's job is to push. There might be a drum fill that would sound really cool, and the drummer's not nailing it. And, maybe we need to take a minute and, figure out, the mechanics of how it should be played, or whatever it is. Maybe the singer's not emotionally connected to the lyrics he's singing. And, maybe it's my job to get the lighting right in the room, or to talk him into the right frame of mind to get him to deliver that emotional feeling behind the words that he's singing. So it's kind of just about being whatever tool is needed to, again, make the music the best it could possibly be.
Yeah, I think the word that came to mind as you were talking is generosity. The generosity of the artist to let other people critique them. I had just seen a group, and they had a great songwriter. And I talk about Mike Nugent all the time, and Diane Lotney, who sings in his band, and she's got creds up and down. She sang with Dr. John for 5 years, and she said to Mike, "Hey, I got this song you wrote, a very personal song." He goes, "It really speaks to me," and he was generous enough to say, "Yeah, you take it. you take it and you run with it. And she brought it to a different, I won't say a better level, but a different level that it drew emotion from me, knowing that it spoke to her.
Yeah.
She just emoted that. So let me ask you this: put yourself on the other side. You're an artist is coming into a producer to use his studio and lay down, say, an EP, 5 tracks. They come in with 5 tracks. What advice, what tips would you give that artist or band to say, hey, before you come in, I'd like to see you have this, and that? Is that a fair question?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, the greatest thing would be to know your music. Like you said with the digital stuff, there's a lot of times where, some bands will write stuff in the computer. There's programs where you don't even have to play guitar. You could just write the riff in the computer and it might sound awesome. And then if you show up to a studio and you've never played that before, you might not realize that, hey, I can't get from this chord to this chord. It's not possible,
Right.
Or I recorded, the tempo of this song is way faster than my right hand is capable of playing. So I think the biggest thing is, if, like I said, I like to get involved as early as possible once there's a song. And then, pre-pro it and come out, throw ideas out and essentially write the song so that once it's time to track, once it's time to actually hit the record button, we just have to nail takes, Obviously,
Right.
There's totally room to be creative once that process has started already. But if you've done all the creating and the ideas and the brainstorming before you walk in, then it's just about nailing your part. So I think it's, once that song is written, go home and practice it and practice it and practice it. Practice it faster than the actual tempo of the song. And then once it's your day to show up and play your part,
You'll nail it.
you'll nail it. You got a much
Yeah.
better chance of nailing it.
Nice. All right, so that's one tip. How about another? Give me two more.
I'll give you 2 more. All right.
All right. No pressure.
This is a simple one, but make sure your instruments are tuned up. That if there's a battery in your guitar, that it's new, that you have new strings. Like, well, to me, I say making a song. I equate things to cooking, and I'm gonna
Great.
get hungry here if I keep talking about this. But the best meals, like you watch all these cooking shows on TV, and there's so many of these amazing chefs that it's like they served this steak and all they did was put salt and pepper on it, and the reason being is because they treated the meat the right way. They got the best possible cut of meat that they could get. And then you don't have to add all this extra stuff after the fact to make it taste better because it already tastes good.
Right.
And, for me, it's kind of the same thing when you're making music. If you have new strings on your guitar and your guitar is intonated properly and it's set up nice and there's a new battery in it and, all those things, every little piece that you add to that just contributes to the natural flavor of whatever the music you're going to create is. So it's a simple one, but drums being tuned up, making sure that if you're a bass player that you have new strings on your bass. If you're a vocalist, make sure you've warmed up.
Right.
Before you get here, a lot of guys will warm up on the car ride over. So being prepared before you walk in the doors is important.
Now, how about feedback? Do you find that people are shy about feedback when you play a track back to them, or what has been your experience when you've said, okay, here's like the first draft, what do you think?
So we're all human, right? And it's my job to figure out what the artist needs. There are some artists that they just want, all right, what do you got? Tell me what I need to do. Oh, you want it like this? All right, cool. I'll do it like that.
Okay.
Some guys, you give them feedback and you got to phrase it a really delicate way. Otherwise, it might get them out of the moment, and then we're not going to capture something awesome.
Right. Right.
Some guys need to be pushed to be, they like, that almost like a coach, not barking at them, but like getting them getting them psyched up to play whatever thing that there is. So, I kind of am prepared for that, it takes me a very short period of time to be like, okay, I understand what you need in order to play your best. And it's my job to figure out what that is so that you can play your best.
Nice. So if I approach it from a chef's point of view, One, you have to, in meeting with them, you have to know, all right, what cuisine are we working with here? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of meat do we have? You're adding a little spice, a lot of spice, depends, right? And then you're delivering it out and saying, okay, did that taste good to you? Tastes good to me, that sort of thing. And then you kind of move forward from there. I think it's what I assume in your profession is, one, you have to have a good ear, as we spoke about earlier, but you also have to read personalities and how to work with those personalities where they can be as creative as possible. And then, what you've just done with your studio, give them a space that they're going to be comfortable in, and you're going to get the sound that you're looking for out of the studio.
Sure. I mean, at the very basis of, you said generosity before,
Mm-hmm.
I think a big thing is trust. You know, anybody that's created music, there's probably nothing more personal to you than, I mean, it's your baby. If you make a song, you can't imagine something more personal to you that you can create, you know?
Sure.
So if you're going to bring that to someone else and allow them to have any kind of influence over that thing that you've created, that's a huge step in trust. And I totally understand that. So I definitely treat that with the respect that it deserves. And, you know, like I said, my intent is always to just take the artist's vision, the artist's sound, and just maximize it to its best potential. You know, I don't want, like you said before, in terms of cuisine, someone comes to me and wants to make music, you know, I want them to walk out of here with the music that they envisioned at
Right.
the best sonic level that they could have imagined it. I don't want them with a great sounding piece of music that doesn't sound like what they wanted it to sound like, if that
Gotcha.
makes sense.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. Now, you're a heavy metal guy. That's the kind of music you like. Would you say you cover certain genres, or let me twist that around? Would somebody come to you because, oh, he's a heavy metal producer, or what's the picture of the type of music you've produced or like to produce?
So oh yeah, it does. I mean, I listen to all types of music. I literally, I know everybody says that, but I do listen to all types of music, and I find great music interesting. And it really doesn't matter. Like, I listen to indie music, hip hop, country, metal, you know, you name it. I listen to everything, and I've really worked in everything as well.
Okay.
I've worked in country, I've worked in hip hop. I'm just finishing up a record with a singer-songwriter who's predominantly piano. He's got horns and violins in his music. And obviously I've done a bunch of heavy music as well. That's where, you know, my tastes are most cultivated.
Okay.
But at the same time, you know, artists have walking out of here with a country song that they love. You know, artists have walked out of here with a hip hop song that knocked their socks off. So, you know, we are definitely capable of handling any kind of genre.
Nice. Now, in that light, do you also, let's say the piano guy comes to you and he's got music. Do you have a corral of people that you'll pull in, like you'll pull a bass player in or a percussionist, or do you approach it that way, or is it up to the artist? So I'm really playing dummy here.
Sure.
You know, you walk in, I got a song, I'm really good at it, but I'm just a guitar player.
Right.
What can you do for me, Dan?
I mean, that's a good question. There's I wear a lot of hats in this place. You know, sometimes it's session, you know, instrumentalist. So like, there was an artist I worked with once where he played acoustic guitar and he sang, and you know, I did drums in the computer, and I played the bass, and I played the electric guitar that was on it, and I played the solos.
Oh wow!
And then mix and master it. There's another artist that I work with that he's a guitar player and he's a singer, and I do the drums and the bass, and then I mix and master. The piano indie solo artist that I was alluding to before, he's a great composer. So
Okay.
you know, he'll come in and, you know, he'll have the song completely laid out with all the violins and all, you know, everything done, and I'll add drums to it, and then mix it and master it. And you know, if there's something that I'm that the artist wants that I'm not personally capable of performing. I have lots of connections with people that are really talented musicians, and we could always, get what needs to be on there, in there.
Yeah, that I think that's key, is having the resources to pull in, hey, you know what? I got somebody who's going to add something to this, and he's not just a bass player, he's really can fit that mode. For you. And that's another ingredient in the secret sauce, or the value that I would say is in a producer, is the connections that I don't have that he or she can pull together to make it happen. So let me ask you another question. So now everything's done. Okay, you've handed over the files to them. Do they work with you also on how they get it up to the streaming apps and stuff like that? Do you have any tips at that aspect? Because I know it's easy to put up, but there's other safeguards you want to have to protect your music, I would assume.
Yeah. I get involved as much as they ask me to. Okay. Most artists that I've worked with, they put up their own stuff, whether it's on DistroKid or CD Baby or whatever platform they're using. And I think they've made it pretty user-friendly to do yourself. I'm absolutely open to doing that for artists if they need that, but most of the time that's something they handle if the song is done.
Yeah. Now, tell me if I'm wrong, because I remember talking to someone, and we were putting his music up on Spotify, and he's like, "Okay, I'm both the artist and I'm the producer." Apparently, there's some sort of split in revenue when it comes to doing that. You familiar with that and how that works?
Yes.
So every artist should be their own artist and their own production company, as far as two separate entities to get both pots of the pennies, the fractions of the pennies that come down. From Spotify.
If they're the ones that produce their own music, then absolutely.
Gotcha. Really cool stuff. It's and I'm really excited for you as far as getting that whole room together. That's the room behind us, right?
Yeah, this is it.
We're in your studio right now.
We're in my studio. Yeah, it's a long time coming. It's it was the past handful of years I've been working at other studios, and for a while I was doing house calls. A lot of the artists I worked for, especially the guys that are solo acts, I'd have a mobile rig, and we'd schedule a session, and I'd bring all my stuff to their house. And after years of lugging around mics and stands and instruments, and every time I have a session, I got to load up my car and then bring it in at the end of the night. And I remember that was kind of the impetus for building this thing. I was pulling my hair out with lugging gear around. Yeah. And my wife was like, "You need your own spot." I was like, "All right." So I looked around at some places, and rent on Long Island is insanity. So
right.
She's like, "Why don't you just build one over here?" And I was like, "That's actually a really good idea." So that's what we did. You got a good
spouse, brother.
I do.
Very good spouse.
I really do. She's amazing.
That's Hey, I can ask you this, because it's interesting that as bands get their name out on social media, or they're trying to get gigs in larger venues, the venues ask, "All right, send me a video of what you've got." You have any experience with, or you have any pointers to make about live recording? And because I don't know, it's all over the place. As far as I've recorded stuff for people, and I'm just like, man, it's not the same as when I was there.
Yeah,
it was good. I'm just not capturing it. Do you pull it off the soundboard? What do you do? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Live, it's tricky. I think it depends on the sound guy. It depends. If you're talking about doing a live recording, I would suggest communicating with whoever's running live sound that night prior to the fact. Sound guy's got a lot on their plate, and if it's 10 minutes
past minute,
if it's 10 minutes before you go on stage, and you're like, "Hey, we want to."
Can I plug into your board?
Yeah, we want the live recordings for tonight. He's probably got 100 different things that he's trying to get right before you start your first song. So if you're communicating with him in advance, you probably got a better chance of getting some good files after the fact. But if you tell him really late in the game, it might not be the best quality, and you can't blame them. They got a lot on their plate, those guys.
Yeah, and I think also finding One, I think it's very difficult to find many places that offer live music, original music.
Yeah.
It's the time of the cover band. So finding those places, I have one in mind. I'm thinking about Industry in Huntington, where you can set up a live performance and have controls over the lighting and what you do. I think that's kind of key.
Yeah.
Lighting and sound. That's the key to a good video.
Absolutely.
So, do you want to talk? You want to talk about any of the artists that you're working with right now, or you want to tell us more about your studio?
Sure. Which do you want to hear first?
Let's talk about the artists, and then we'll talk about what's comprised of the studio itself.
Sure. Probably in a couple of months, Peter Lakes will be releasing his first record. There's a pretty cool development that happened, and we got introduced through a mutual friend, and he's the piano player composer I was alluding to before, and it started out as just, hey, I wrote this song, I recorded it myself, can you mix it? Mm-hmm. And we met, and I gave him a note or two about the recording, and push comes to shove, I ended up producing the song, and what turned into can you mix one song turned into now we're 44 songs in. Oh, wow. And yeah, it's been a crazy ride. A lot of fun to work on that record. It's music is very eclectic. There's lots of different themes and genres weaving into. I mean, it all sounds like him, but it's very much like a tree. There's no two songs sound the same. It was
amazing.
It was a challenge because usually if you're mixing a punk rock record, the songs are going to be different, but the overall sound of that album is going to be pretty consistent.
Right.
And this one was very much not that. So it was a lot of communication, a lot of, hey, is this the sound you're going for this? And but it came out awesome. We actually have our final session tomorrow night for this one, and
good luck. We
have a band called Glacia, who I've worked with a bunch. We're getting to work on a single starting this week. He's got a new record out called Deliverance that came out a couple months ago. It came out awesome. My band Gavel Down will have a new album out in the next month or two.
Okay.
So a lot of good music coming out of this place.
Now let me ask you this: as far as I know, the trend has been, or the philosophy that I've heard about, either doing an album or doing an EPK of just 3 to 5 songs. As far as the artists that you're working with, what would you say the ratio is of those who say, "Hey, I want to put out an EPK of 3, keep my audience engaged every so many months, and throw out 2 or 3 songs or 5 songs"? What's the ratio that you're running into?
Most of the artists I've been working with want full records. So I've been doing like 10 to 12 song albums for the most part. Every once in a while, a lot of those artists will be like, hey, I got a single I want to do, and we'll do one song. Or, but it's true. A lot of the big push behind keeping audiences engaged is shorter pieces of music and just more frequent releases. Right. Which I get,
Plus, sometimes it's an affordability thing as well.
For sure. And also I think it has to do with, what's the context of, what's the content of the album? Do you have 10 songs that belong together?
Right.
There are times where, you've written 9 or 10 great songs, but maybe 4 of them don't sound like they belong with the other 5 or 6. And that might be a reason to only release 5. And then maybe you release those other 4, 5 or 6 months after the fact. Even though a lot of people are listening to their music on shuffle, which I totally do, and everybody does, and they make their own playlists and things like that. But I do still appreciate a piece of art as a whole. Like whether you're putting out an EP or a full album, having song 1 all the way through to song 10 or song 11 or song 6. Having it take you on a ride, I think is important, and not just sticking 6 songs together.
Right. And, it brings us back to your early comments of the cassette, playing all of side A and all of side B. I did it with albums, and that continuity, really speaks to you, can speak to you differently. Maybe it's a time gone by, I don't know. But, hey, people still buying vinyl and albums and appreciate that full story of an album that speaks to them. And you're right. Do they all go and fit together is kind of key. Hey, I want to remind the audience that we're going to have all the information on how to connect to Dan in his studio below. So take a look at that. Click on the links. Dan will call you back and set up a session and talk about your art. Hey, Dan, it was a real pleasure. Thanks for drawing back the curtains for us on a peek into your studio. I wish you all the best now that you got new digs to create art for us out there. It's an important part of it.
Appreciate the time, man. It was a lot of fun.
All right, brother. Talk to you soon. Be well. Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate the time you spent with us. Please subscribe and comment and visit us at gigdestiny.com. Till next time, be generous with your joy, keep your spirits high, and let the music take you on a journey. Be well. Peace.